Hello there, and welcome into the KSL Sports Front Page, brought to you by University Federal Credit Union. Today is a little bit of a fortunate day to have big news and to have the two Utah insiders for KSLSports.com. I am Trevor Allen, joined alongside It's Utah's World podcast host Tom Hackett, and also former punter and two-time Ray Guy Award winner Tommy. Today's been a busy day, hasn't it?
Trev, we were expecting this news to break over the last couple of days, really, and for it to finally come to fruition and to make its way to the public, I think is it's kind of relieving for me. I don't know how you feel about it, but we were kind of in the know a little bit. We were hearing what was going to happen a while ago. We finally got the email midday today, and of course now everybody can talk about it, including us, and so that's what this next 20-odd 30 minutes is going to entail. I'm excited for it. There's a lot to dive into, Trev, but it'll be interesting to see the reaction from the fan base, the national media, and of course KSLSports.com is basically a one-stop shop to get educated on all that.
And something that fans who are tuning in can do, they can submit questions for you and I on this by just commenting, and we'll get those, and we'll get to those questions. And if you guys have comments on it, obviously keep it clean. But Tom, we'll just start with this. I mean, so you and I have been talking to our sources throughout, kind of trying to get a grasp on this, and it was one of those things where we didn't know exactly what was going to happen, whether they were going to bring back Morgan, whether if he was going to stay as the coordinator on defense, or what was really going on. But now that we know what's going on, what was your initial reaction when you heard the news that he was officially coming back to Utah football?
I wasn't surprised, Trev, and I mean that in the sense that I never heard Coach Scalley use any racist language when I was a member of the Utah football team, and so I never thought of Morgan Scalley to be racist. Now, with that being said, I must admit I'm a white male who doesn't have to deal with some of the insensitivity from certain individuals towards those of minorities and people of color. So that's why I kind of never really had a strong opinion. I was quite delicate when I was trying to, I guess, get my point across, and that was, I honestly don't know how this investigation is going to turn out. But to see that he's returned, reinstated as defensive coordinator, we'll get into the logistics and the exact details as to what all that entails. Certain ramifications. I think the university did what they needed to do. They didn't hold a internal investigation. It was an outside investigation. Outside firm conducted it. So hopefully there were no bias. And they interviewed 35 current former players, a bunch of colleagues. What I've been told is and this wasn't in the report, but they went back to his high school days, Highland Ram days here in Salt Lake City. And look, it comes across thorough. From the information we've been given, so happy for Scalley to be given this second lifeline, if you will. Mark Harlan had an interesting quote, Trev, before I kind of let you talk about the situation. He said midway through the teleconference at 1:30 today, he said, a man is not judged by one mistake. A man is judged by his entire body of work. And look, I do agree. That everybody makes mistakes, some mistakes more significant than others, and this is certainly a mistake of significance. But I do trust and think that the university, Mark Harlan, Coach Whittingham, the powers that be, I'm sure Ruth Watkins had a part to play in all of this as well. I think they did the right thing, Trev.
Yeah, and people have asked me my own thoughts on Morgan, and I'm just going to tell you of what I've told everyone else in my conversations is that I've been covering the Utes for about the last 10 years, since about 2010, and I've dealt with Morgan a lot. Heck, I had him on for a one of those streams. I had the team that won the Fiesta Bowl back in 2004. And Morgan was on that panel, and Morgan's always been good to me. But again, just like you, I'm a white male, but I also didn't play football. The way that coaches look at media and the way that media looks at coaches are completely different than what players do, because we don't see everything the media doesn't on what goes on during practice and what goes on during games. But everything that I've heard is that Morgan Scalley, this isn't really who he is. So there's that. But there are some things that in order for Morgan Scalley to come back, he has to do a couple of things, and a couple of things have happened as far as his payment, and also some other consequences, I guess, if you will. And one of the things, and this isn't really much of a consequence, it's something to help him learn and grow from this, and that is Coach Scalley's going to have to engage with leadership of the university's equity, diversity, and inclusion team, including Vice President Marianne Villarreal. He will be in regular and ongoing diversity and inclusion education, and will be expected to be a key partner in addressing issues of racism and bias in the Utah Athletics Department, the university, and the broader community. And Morgan said that on the teleconference call that you and I were both on earlier today. And then another thing, Tom, and I'll ask for your thoughts on these two things coming up. Back towards the end of last year, there was news that Morgan Scalley received a new contract that would be added on to what he had now. And it was a multi-year deal, and he was going to be paid about $1.1 million per year. Instead, now his new contract will go back to what he made in 2018, and it's now a one-year deal. It's not a multi-year deal now. It's a one-year deal worth $525,000, so basically cutting his pay in half, if you will. And then also at the end of last year, part of that contract, and Tom, you and I have both found out about this too through people that we have talked to, is that Mark Harlan offered verbally that Coach Scalley would be the head coach in waiting for when Kyle Whittingham decides to retire. That offer has now been taken away, and as of right now, he is not the head coach in waiting. So were you shocked by those two pieces of news that came out along with Scalley coming back?
I don't know if I was shocked, Trev. I think again, it's the right thing to do. You can't pay somebody who's admitted to using a racial slur, albeit in 2013. You can't give him a raise to the extent of $1.1 million. So they were essentially forced to go back and assess kind of financially where they thought Morgan was at, $525K a year, which so happened to be how much he was making in 2018, so 2 years ago now, was where they ended up. And then, of course, the head coach in waiting, I didn't know exactly that a verbal offer had been made. I do know this. I was speaking to Mark Harlan on the sideline prior to the Alamo Bowl, and I just bluntly asked him, what's the deal with Scalley? And he says, look, his phone's ringing. And he didn't go into detail. I imagine, and what I took from that was he was getting head coaching opportunities elsewhere. And his love, desire, passion for the University of Utah is extreme. And Utah felt as though there was no other way to best keep him around as to offer a head coaching waiting, which makes sense again. Like it all makes sense to me. So I'm not shocked, Trev. I think Mark Harlan, to be frank, I think is a wizard. I think he's a genius. I think everything he does turns to gold for the most part. The way he interacts with the boosters of the university, the coaching staff, the relationships he's able to build. I respect Mark Harlan more than I respect a lot of people. I mean, he's a class act. So I think the way he's handled this has been really, really impressive. I think the university ought to be grateful and thankful that Mr. Harlan is around and acting as the current athletic director. Were you shocked, Trev? What were your thoughts?
I was shocked a little bit. I guess I wouldn't say shocked, because I had heard rumblings that there was a possibility of him having that taken away as far as being the head coach in waiting. There were talks about that, and I wasn't really sure if that was going to be something they acted upon. And in the coming days, things changed. But just to have that come out. But also, it was asked during that teleconference, if Harlan, someone asked Harlan if that was going to be, set in stone, that there's now zero chance of Morgan Scalley being the head coach in waiting, or is there a way for him to earn it back? And he didn't really say either. He just said that right now he isn't going to comment on that, but that there's, and that was where he talked about it being a very serious matter, which we all knew it was, but also what you said, where, a man is judged off of his entire body of work and not off of one mistake. And so that's why is why I was, I'm not ruling it out that he is going to be the next head coach at Utah, but it's going to take a lot of work for him to get that back. Sure.
I think he's still the favorite. If I were to guess right now, but here's the deal, and the Utah fan base knows this. He has to prove that he can recruit, because the name of the game in college football, and we've talked about it, we'll continue to talk about it anytime we talk about college football, the name of the game is recruiting. Okay, the easy job is coaching the players once they're there, developing, coaching, maturing, teaching life lessons. Like, that is the easy part, but getting these kids on campus and committing to you is the hard part, because of how much interest a lot of these kids has, especially the ones that Utah is now going after. So, if he can't recruit Trev, then boy, he's going to have a hard time. And I don't think he's going to be the head coach in waiting. Now, if he can find a way to get back to his winning ways on the recruiting trail, then I think he's the favorite. And for good reason. He's a proven commodity. He made a mistake. Hopefully people, recruits, families out there, forgive him, accept his apology, regain trust, and can come to Utah because of Morgan Scalley. And if that's the case, he's the head coach in waiting under Kyle Whittingham. If that isn't the case, they have no other choice. They must move on, and there'll be stories, Trev, on KSL Sports as to who certain candidates might be now that tag is officially removed from the contract of Morgan Scalley.
Now, something that Kyle Whittingham mentioned in that teleconference was that out of the 57 players that Morgan signed to the program, 51 of them are minority players. And so to me, that is helpful. But also keep in mind, Tom, it's kind of a new day and age of what's going on, especially in 2020 with all that has been going on with this subject. And to have this come out could really change the mind of players. And I feel like that there's a lot in, probably none of us will ever really know how much work Morgan's going to have to put into gaining all that trust back. But I feel like it's going to be a pretty heavy load.
It'll be, it's going to be, and it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of effort, which I'm sure he's fine with. Regarding the 51 players of minority, Trevor, it's worth noting, and I don't know if people know this, but Morgan Scalley, the way Utah football coaches recruit is from a geographical standpoint, and Morgan's main focus is the state of Texas, one of the more premier breeding grounds for college football prospects. And in the state of Texas, there's a large diverse group of prospects, large portion of that, though, being African-American descent. And Utah's even had success with some Polynesian players out of the state of coming to Utah. So he is, his job as kind of lead recruiter in Texas is monumental for the success of this program. And he's going to have to, don't get me wrong, there are going to be families out there that when he comes to recruit their sons, they're going to have questions, and he's going to have that conversation. And it's an unpleasant, uncomfortable conversation to have. But he has no choice. If he loves this game, he loves this program more than most. And he's going to have those conversations. He's going to do everything in his power to best gain trust of prospects. And it's not going to be easy. There's no doubt about it. But, if anybody can do it, I put my trust and faith in Morgan Scalley. He is a tireless worker.
Yeah, and that's something that we've all known, is that it's basically him and, Sharif Shah are kind of the top recruiters on that coaching staff. And then right there, I mean, they all do a great job, there's some who, you know, sign more than others, but that's because, just like you said, the areas that they're in, and when you're covering a whole state, and that's probably, I would say, is the second biggest hotbed of talent in Texas. I mean, the only other spot that probably has more talent in that state is California, and primarily Southern California. You know, you're going to get a lot of those talented players out of there, especially when you're covering a whole state. But Morgan now has that challenge ahead of him, and just like you said, I think that he'll be able to get past it. But he's going to come across a lot now of what's going on, because, you know, the news like this nowadays, Tom, gets out all the time just because of having Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all that stuff, to where they're able to find out news very quickly. Now, something you wrote that I want to get your thoughts on. Again, you and I were both on that teleconference that Mark Harlan was on, along with Kyle Whittingham and Morgan Scalley, and they all each had opening statements. Something that really stood out to you and me was the emotion that Morgan showed in his apology to the media and to the fan base.
Yeah, it was very powerful, I thought, Trev. You know, and you guys that are watching this, or that end up watching this at a later time, you know, go to the story and click play for yourself. Trev, you helped me out with the story. You uploaded the audio. So just click play and listen to yourself. Personally, for me, listening to it was emotional. It felt sincere. There were moments throughout where, you know, he had to pause and try and regain some composure to continue talking. And you know what was interesting was often when he became really emotional was when he was talking about the playing group. And I think, you know, the insensitivity, the hurt, the pain, the agony that he knows he has caused so many of his players, both current and former, has just destroyed him. And it's actually quite a difficult thing to listen to, but at the same time, very, very powerful. What do you make of it, of the opening statement, Trev?
You know, just like you, it felt really powerful. And, you know, even throughout the whole teleconference, he would pause whenever he talked about the love he has for his players that he coached in the past and that he currently coaches now. The one thing that I will say, Tom, is that, you know, this whole thing came out when he accidentally sent a text message that had a racial slur in it to a guy in Texas who he was trying to recruit to Utah, and he sent it on accident. But that text was supposed to go to another coach, and to me, you know, had it just gone to the coach, we would never be in this situation. But I think of what this does is that it teaches him that no matter who you're talking to, you've got to handle yourself with the utmost standards, and you got to, you know, not use words like that before. And you could really tell Morgan in his comments on that teleconference that he meant his apology and meant what he said, and that it was very powerful, just like you said. And so, you know, I felt like that he's going to learn a lot from this, and he's going to be a better man.
I think, you know, even if you're not a Utah fan, you're a BYU fan, or somehow you tremble across this video, you're listening to us talk about the situation at hand, you know, and you're just a regular guy, you know, just click play on the audio. Go to KSLsports.com, find that article. Morgan Scalley gets emotional during apology to players, colleagues, you know, click on it and click play, because, you know, it's worth a listen. It's really powerful and strong. And I thought he did a great job trying his best, you know, to maintain composure. But do yourself a favor and go click play and put it on loudspeaker and let the family listen in, because it's interesting, it's powerful, and it's certainly worth your while, specifically with all of the status the world is in at the minute regarding certain initiatives and messages.
Tom, I actually think we're able to play it on here, and have others listen. I think. Do you
Let's
want to
see.
do you want to play that for everyone here? I'm going to make sure that we have that on here. In our
How long
settings.
is it, Trev?
It's about 3 minutes.
Okay, let's do it.
But it by the way, it's pretty raw. Like all I did was just trim him from the very beginning, and then to when they open it up for a Q&A. I did not edit any of the pauses or any of the times where he got emotional. So it's about as raw as you can get. So here, let's see if we can hear it.
Trev, I can't hear it.
You cannot hear it? Okay. I can hear it, but
I think it's because you got your headphones in, but that's all right.
So anyway, I would highly recommend going and listening to that. It's right there, right at your leisure. You can listen to it. And it's about 3.5 minutes long. Now, a couple of things, Tom. Let's dive into. So part of the so we ended up getting an email from Utah football, and it had the advisory for the teleconference at 1:30 that we attended, but it also had 2 attachments. One was the records of the independent. They had a firm on the outside look into this matter, and they sent in of what they found on it. And there's some things in here that it's just about what some players in their interviews said that Scalley did, and then they asked Scalley, "Did you do that?" And then he would confirm or deny. And there's some things in here that it kind of just tells you everything that went on, except for obviously the main stuff, which is what was said in that text message and things like that. But really, it's more just about the players, and just like Mark Harlan said that the players really showed their love for Morgan Scalley, and that was one of the reasons why he and Kyle Whittingham decided to bring him back after this was all done.
Yeah, he in the investigation, they basically summarized the findings, and one of the top bullet points within the summary was how a number of the players were quoted saying that they were shocked.
Mm-hmm.
They first heard the news surrounding the immediate suspension of Morgan Scalley due to this racial slur. And I guess, that goes to show that most players out there didn't think Scalley was a racist. I will say this about Scalley, and it's worth noting, and that's he pushes his players. He demands more from his players than most coaches do. He's tireless. He's a perfectionist, and he demands excellence from a playing group, which is asking a lot for 18-year-olds at times with everything that kind of can go on in that time of your life. Some players obviously dealing with family issues. Others are struggling with school, all from different parts of the world, different parts of America. He does push his players really, really hard. And occasionally I'm sure that there are some players out there that take his demands and requests personally. And I don't know, maybe he's going to change. Maybe he's going to have to change. He's going to be forced to change the way he coaches. And he's going to have to come across more sincere. He's going to have to come across and approach certain situations differently than he once did. I don't know, but that's going to be something worth keeping an eye on, worth speaking to people within that program as to the reaction of Morgan Scalley's coaching strategy, because what he was doing previously, Trev, was working. Despite obviously the use of a racial slur that didn't work and will never work, but from a coaching standpoint, he was hard. He was firm on his players. He demanded a lot, and that worked. That Utah defense is different than most. They are fierce and ferocious, and A lot of that is thanks to Morgan Scalley and Kyle Whittingham and what they're able to do. But I think he's going to be forced to change the way he approaches certain situations. That's for sure.
Well, and I know that there's a lot of players now, and even in the past with that program, anyone who's ever been around Morgan, you'd want to run through a wall for him because he's that kind of guy. But, again, it all goes back to, making the one mistake. And that was one of the things that kind of led to this and having someone on the outside looking into this matter. And that is to see if this was a one-time thing or if it was multiple times where he used, racial slurs and, at least, according to the findings, there wasn't much else really to look at. Now, something else that came in that email to the media was a letter that was sent out that was from both Mark Harlan and Kyle Whittingham. Now, they went into it about, talking about what's going on in our country and with, issues with racism and injustice, and leading to, important conversations and, but also to, uphold the standards of integrity and accountability. And that's one of the things that Mark Harlan is trying to uphold his coaching staff and student athletes to is the highest standards when it comes to this subject. And then you end up going down and they're, talking about right here in the letter where, on a social media, they were notified of a text message. We all know that a social media account and that led to this whole thing with Morgan Scalley. And then it towards the bottom was when they really announced that, and right here it says, therefore we have determined Morgan Scalley will remain in his position on the football staff, because there were people who were wondering, was he going to get demoted? But that really isn't the case. And then that leads to what he's going to be doing with the University's Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion team, along with his pay cut and his offer of being the head coach in waiting being taken away.
Right. I think what we do from here on out, Trev, as members of KSL Sports, guys that follow Utah athletics closely, I think what the fan base is going to want to know, a handful of things. One, how'd the playing group respond to one thing we haven't touched on that's probably worth doing so is Scalley admitted to speaking to the team via a Zoom call yesterday, Tuesday, June 30th, in the morning, where, and again, he didn't go into great detail, but he apologized profusely. I imagine had some explaining to do. I don't know how much detail was involved, but and then following that Zoom meeting, the playing leadership council met with Mark Harlan and Coach Whittingham, and they went over the Zoom meeting and where to go to from there. Following the player leadership council meeting with Mark Harlan and Coach Whittingham and Mark Harlan got together, made the final decision. So it all unfolded yesterday, which was Tuesday, June 30th, the last day of June. But there are a number of things the fan base is going to be interested in. One, the players' reaction. Two, will there be anybody transferring because they brought him back? Three, will Morgan Scalley be able to recruit at the same level he once was able to? Four, how has his coaching strategy, game plan changed, evolved, developed, whatever you want to call it, following the investigation? So there is a ton that, what do his colleagues think? What's the response going to be from his colleagues, people that he spends 10 hours a day with in meetings, in the lunchroom, in the break room, out at lunch, on the recruiting trail. There's so much still to unpack, but, and whether or not, of course, Utah Athletics kind of gives us any insight into that is also to be determined. They like to keep the matters pretty private, but certainly the fans are going to have questions, and they're going to have questions for some time. But as of right now, Morgan Scalley returns as defensive coordinator, and he's got a big job on his hands, and 6 Utah defenders in 2019 ended up getting drafted in the recent NFL draft. That's 6 of 7, by the way. 6 of 7 Utah players were on the defensive side. He lost, how many was it? He lost 9 starters, Trev,
Yep.
of that 2019 defense, only 2 returning. That's Devin Lloyd and is it
Mika Tafua.
And so, boy, is he gonna have his hands full trying to replicate what he was able to do in 2019.
Well, and not only that, Tom, something that you end up touching on was just how are the players going to react, and you've already talked about that. Morgan Scalley or that Kyle Whittingham and Mark Harlan met with the leadership council, which is the guys who are on the team. They're not necessarily captains, although usually the captains are on this council. But it's, what is it? How many players? Like 10 or 12 or something like that, isn't it?
Yeah, it changes every year, but it's anywhere between 10 and 15 players.
Okay, so they all met with Harlan and Whittingham, but keep in mind, Tom, now that he's back, he's going to have to try and gain all the trust back from his current players now, and you're doing this in the middle of a pandemic, and to where you're only meeting with guys on Zoom, and we all know that Zoom meetings and everything virtual isn't the same as meeting a person. You don't really know. I mean, yeah, you can't really tell feelings and kind of the vibe of the room if you're on a Zoom call. So I think that's going to be one of the big challenges for him. And not only that, his entire secondary is gone from last year, and he has a lot to do with that secondary. He and Sharif Shah does, and especially the safeties, which will have brand new starters as well. So it's going to be a big challenge. I mean, it seems like all of this is tumbling down on Morgan, but I feel like that he's a guy who wants to take the opportunity to be able to tackle this challenge.
Certainly. Look, the big question's been answered, Trev. There are still many questions unanswered. They will be over time. The fan base it's going to be interesting to see how their opinions differ, because everybody's entitled to their own opinion. Some are going to be all for it. Others are going to be against it. I imagine the majority are somewhere in the middle. But hopefully, look, we both love Utah football, Utah athletics. I'm just hoping that they can move forward from this and put it in their rearview mirror, and not have somebody make a similar mistake anytime soon or ever, for that matter. That language is unacceptable. It should never be used. It should never have been used. And we're in the middle of a pandemic. There's a lot going on. Let's just remember what's important, and that's to stay healthy, look after your loved ones, make good decisions, and love everybody. Because as my dad would tell me growing up, everybody needs loving, Tommy. So same thing in this case. Let's move forward and continue to find answers.
And Tom, speaking of love, we can't get out of here without giving love to the rest of our team here at KSL Sports and over at KSLSports.com. And that is, we have a lot of content out today. And it's not just Morgan Scalley. It starts right here. The first story of today was Southern Utah unveils a new theme for the upcoming season. And we have everything from the Jazz to English Premier League to BYU, more Jazz. Jordan Love was, signed his deal with the Green Bay Packers today. There's some of the reports out there about NFL shortening the season. So just make sure you head over to KSLSports.com. We have you covered on any team that you are a fan of in this state, and even in the nation, because we cover the leagues. And this is now the month, Tom. Sports is coming back, right?
Sports is coming back. Summer's in full swing. At KSL, I think July is the month we get most of our public holidays, which is a shame because this is when we're getting busy all of a sudden. Yeah. Although it's not a shame, it's a good thing because we haven't had too much to report on over the last couple months. But it's exciting, Trev. It's exciting. Hey, big shout out to our sponsor as well, of course, University Credit. What are they? University Federal Credit Union.
Yeah, Tommy, if you're going to give them a plug, give them the right one, right?
Sorry.
All right. Hey, Tommy, it's always good to catch up with you. Check out It's Utah's World podcast, and I am the host of the Crimson Corner podcast. We are your Utah Utes insiders. Make sure you guys check out KSLSports.com. And as always, the KSL Sports front page will come at you. every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 4 p.m. right here on the KSL Sports Facebook page. But also follow us on Twitter. I'm at Trevor A Sports. Tom is at Tom Can't Hackett. And we are at KSL Sports on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Tommy, we'll see you, man.
See you guys. Be well.